Mr. Daniel Sheehan, Ray Szymanski, and none other than Richard Dolan. There he is, walking behind the scenes. You're getting the behind the scenes.
Switch out with you here.
Walking around his house. There we go.
Okay. Yeah. No. I was down there with Tracy and Jordan and Lori.
I do know. Yes.
This compilation of these letters is really quite phenomenal. And what I was doing is talking with Jeffrey about the sort of larger context in which all of these letters and all of these testimonies take place. And I was trying to have Jeffrey to explain exactly what he understood he was trying to do. And what he's trying to do is trying to get this issue, which has got some different dimensions to it, obviously, but to get this issue undertaken as a serious issue in the academy, in the universities, in the colleges, et cetera, to start getting the various departments that are pertinent to this looking at these letters, looking at these testimonies, looking at these issues. This is very similar to what Eric Weinstein has been talking about, a kind of a person who for decades poo-pooed the entire issue of UFOs and extraterrestrial life and extra-dimensional beings, all that. He just poo-pooed it all generally as a major PhD scholar, from Harvard, delivering lectures at Oxford on the origins of the universe, who viewed himself as quite adept at really sophisticated issues, still was part of that large community that just completely poo-poos this entire realm. So Eric Weinstein and guys like Jeff Kripal are now moving into looking at this, trying to get scientists and philosophers and sociologists, et cetera, to start looking at this. I think we can realistically trace most of this back to, again, the release of these these videotapes and stuff with the endorsement, basically, of the New York Times, and to some very lesser extent, the Defense Department. This is what is known as sort of an epistemological question: is what is it that most normal people do to try to figure out what's true? And what they do is they rely upon authority figures to tell them, whether it's the New York Times, or whether it's universities or government officials. And that's why this is so important. What's happened back in December of 2017 is that the New York Times and their board of editors actually made a decision that it was time to get this information out. It wasn't that they didn't know about this before, but it was very similar to the Vietnam War, when I was privileged to be one of the lawyers for the Pentagon Papers for the New York Times. And when the New York Times put all this information about the war in Vietnam up in the front pages of the New York Times, suddenly there was this whole major sea change in the American public's view of the war. They said, oh, gee, these things that these fringe people who've been opposing the war have been saying turn out to be true, because the New York Times said so. The same thing has happened now with the UFO issue and the follow-up of people like Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo. What they're doing is they're opening the pathway for more people to listen to Richard Dolan, for example. Here, I mean, Richard has done one of the great services for this entire issue with his volumes of the UFOs in the national security state. Is now working on volume 3, probably 3A and 3B.
That's right. That's exactly right. We'll just say 3 and 4. But
yeah, 3 and 4.
It's true.
What I'm saying is that this is an extraordinary moment in our human history of opening onto this subject, because, as I've often said, this is a moment that is going to be remembered for 1,000 years into the future. These couple decades that we're all involved in this right now are going to be seen as the opening stage of an entire new dimension of human experience, reaching out into the stars, reaching out beyond the boundaries of our solar system to encounter an actual extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, this having been said, this is one of and probably the predominant, at least, theory about what all this means. The theory is that this is an extraterrestrial civilization visiting us in craft that have all kinds of extraordinary capacities, and that these beings seem to have all kinds of extraordinary capacities themselves that are that appear to be kind of interdimensional, intertemporal, etc. But the predominant theory is still that this is an extraterrestrial civilization coming to encounter us, and that if that is true for operational purposes, this is at an absolutely extraordinary moment. And even though it's been terribly frustrating, over the past 75 years, basically since Roswell, it's been terribly frustrating for everybody who's been involved in this to try to get people to listen. And you can hear the testimonies and all these letters that we're talking about here today that are being gathered by Kripal down at Rice University. Their frustration in not being understood, not being believed, being attenuated. But the fact is, this short 75-year period is coming to an end. So that this is opening now onto the human conversation that has been called for even by the Catholic Church in formal statements saying, look at their pathway is, look at now that we're discovering more and more of these exoplanets, and it appears that these other planets may well harbor life, and potentially much more advanced life than our planet. The time has now arrived to begin the conversation among all of us of the profound philosophical and theological questions, at least, that are presented by the encounter with an extraterrestrial civilization. And that's the period I think we're in. That's the nature of the conversation that I think we need to participate in now. Instead of banging our head against this, saying, you got to listen to us, you got to listen to us, this is true, this is true. We really start to need to move into this more profound and deeper conversation about what this means. Those are just my introductory thoughts here for the day.
Richard, you wanna comment on that?
Yeah, there's a lot. Thank you, Dan. It was a great kind of lead into some of these issues. I just want to give props to the last group that you had on here, Ron, which included my wife, Tracy, along with Alan Smith and Steve Bassett. I thought that was a fantastic conversation. And those themes, I think, will lead into what we're talking about here. In fact, I want to tack on to that theme because I think it's relevant for here, which is who are they and why are they here? And the only reason I just want to harken back to that is because the last book I wrote literally deals with both of those two issues. It's my own speculation, like who are they and why are they here? I call it the alien agendas. And very shortly, I'll say, I believe, we can't know 100% with 100% certainty, but I think I'm just speculating. I think I do know roughly who they are, and I think I roughly have an idea why they're here. And that affects our disclosure conversation. And, we've talked about, well, we achieved nuclear technology in the 1940s. And yeah, that's significant. But I think in the larger view, they're here because we're about to leap right into their world. Mm-hmm. We're entering a new phase of human organization. We went for hundreds of thousands of years as hunters and gatherers. We developed agriculture roughly about 10,000 years ago. That's stage 2 of human society. And then we entered science and industry a couple of 100 years ago, where we completely reorganize ourselves again. Fundamental. These are, there's variations within all of those, but these are basic foundational forms of organization that human beings have had. And we are now entering a fourth phase right now, where we're entering a transhumanist, artificial intelligence, 4G, 5G, 6G surveillance society, basically a human anthill under complete surveillance for the rest of all time, as far as I can see. A fundamental change of human society, maybe almost like the Borg, maybe. But and you can see, like, I don't have a good feeling about this transformation, but it's happening anyway. Who cares what I think? So the point is, we're changing. We're disempowering ourselves individually, but we are definitely empowering ourselves as a species. The weaponry, the technology, space-time manipulation, all of this is so unbelievably fast in the long stretch of history. And so my feeling is that it does look to me that we've been observed for a long time, but the intensive management, the intensive interaction, this is recent, I believe, and only really from the 20th century onward now. when it became evident that these beings could see, here now is humanity. Now they've got the fire of Prometheus. They've got the secret of science, and they're going to be jumping right into this kind of new thing. And this, I think, is what we're seeing going on all around us. This is why we're in the midst of a global revolution. No one calls it a revolution, but that's what it is. It's a centralized, bureaucratized, legalistic, internationally top-down directed global revolution to transform human society basically into a technological police state. But I think that's from the point of view of these other aliens, which I do think there are aliens from other places that are here. I speculate they may want that. That might be good from their point of view. They may not want to deal with 200 separate nations. They might want to deal with a single unified entity where you manage 8 billion human beings into one collective. It's a lot simpler, maybe. I don't have the idea, by the way, that was prevalent in prior eras where these aliens are going to help us move into a new, like an intergalactic brotherhood. I don't believe that. Some people can believe that, and that's fine. I don't. I think I've come to feel it's a delusion. And what I think is that they, like us, probably are interested in their survival. And they are operating on vastly more sophisticated levels of science than we are right now. But that I don't think that science increases in a linear way. I think it increases by leaps. So we're leaping and jumping into a level of a much greater level of parity than we might realize. And I think that they are aware of this. And I think for that reason, it's very important for them to manage our process to the extent possible. And the big question that I ask myself, and I'm going to leave it off here, is we're going through a global revolution right now. And the real question I want to ask is, what is their relationship to that revolution? Do they love it? Are they helping to promote it? Are they indifferent? Do they oppose it? And is there more than one group of them? Which I think we might assume that there probably are multiple groups, because I do think our transformation is probably bringing in the entire galactic neighborhood right now to take a look, because I think we're more significant than even a lot of. Dan was talking about the academicians. I just want to refer to that now. I was on the panel with Danny and Eric Weinstein last summer. That was very nice. And I'm familiar with Jeffrey Kripal's work and some of the other folks in academia. I think they have a long, long, long way to go before they have a sophisticated understanding of this phenomenon. I really do. I think the academic community is so far behind genuine research. And the problem that you find with academicians, and I'm going to generalize, but I think it's true, they think they know a lot more than they know. And they don't realize how steep a learning curve this subject is. And the big problem with the UFO phenomenon, and the real serious issue that we have going forward, is that we are in the middle of a revolution. It is a totalitarian revolution of control. And this is happening. And you can see it. There's now Elon Musk buying Twitter, and that's okay. Maybe that will help things. Maybe it will. It could. But how long will that help? Because the power is absolutely, clearly going toward a direction of control, not freedom, control. And the UFO subject, you see, is very explosive. It's not a safe subject. It is a dangerous subject. We have to recognize. It's not dangerous when good people like Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon are very carefully saying things like, well, maybe there's something out there. We don't know what they are. Well, yes, first they do know what they are, but they have to follow the CYA rule, which, okay, we get that. But the fact is that they are forced in the public domain to talk about this at the kindergarten level, because that's all that not the people can handle, but the establishment can handle. When the New York Times published those stories almost 5 years ago, it wasn't the New York Times decision, I'm quite sure. I think Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal just jumped in because To the Stars Academy did their press conference 2 months earlier, and this stuff was coming out. And Leslie and Ralph jumped on this story, and the New York Times realized we can't throw cold water on this forever. let's get out ahead of this. And what did they do in that article, by the way? They basically forced Leslie and Ralph to throw in these ridiculous, irrelevant, skeptical comments that had nothing to do with anything, but were skeptical placeholders. And since Leslie and Ralph have not done articles, what kind of pieces has the New York Times done? Nothing. The only good work the New York Times has done is from Leslie and Ralph. That's it. The rest of the establishment is, you have to drag these people. So my point is, the UFO subject, when you get into the real issues, okay, what are the real issues? Tracy and Steve were talking last section about the communion letters. That's the abduction phenomenon. That's real. And the cover-up, the deep, deep, deep illegal criminal nature of the UFO cover-up is the other. And those are explosive. And in a world in which we're looking at a technological police state type revolution, internationally directed from above, that is, it's not easily going to let that conversation happen. To me, this is the next generation. This is where we have to focus, is opening that up, because I think it's entirely possible that we lose the opportunity. And when the doors closed, when everyone's plugged into the meta world, sucking the tube that the Matrix offers them for their sustenance, and then it's done. It's over. Then they're captured. So this really is our moment. And what a post-disclosure world would even like. I think about this a lot, but I'm a little bit concerned right now, because it seems to me that we're dealing with a very, very genuine totalitarian movement against the people right now. And my fear has always been that disclosure will happen within the context of a global fascist police state. And if that's the case, I'll pass. I'll take one of Elon's rockets to the Mars and live there with Tracy.
There you go.
Get a little underground bunker and hang out.
It's great, Richard. You refer to the metaverse as you're addressing a metaverse of sorts, as most of the people in our audience are in avatar form right now. Ray, do you want to comment on your thoughts on the overall issues we've been discussing?
Thank you. First of all, I'm delighted to be here and very surprised. I was originally going to be on the other panel, but apparently Cheryl Costa had to bail. And since Ron has done me favors in the past and he needed an extra person, plus he needed someone to really make you guys look good by comparison, I actually agreed to this. So I really think it's fair to me and the listeners just maybe to give a little bit of background as to why I'm here, besides the fact that I'm pinch hitting for Cheryl. I first met you, Richard, back in about 2013 at the International UFO Congress. And you were at your table, and I loved your book. I think it was the second book in the series, the National Security State. Of course, we loved it. And I've talked to you, just briefly since then. And of course, Danny, I met you when we were both speakers at the 2019 conference in Laughlin, and I believe Bob Brown just briefly introduced us, and you were busy getting ready for some other interview. So I have actually met both of you before, but clearly this is the group of countries that end in Stan, Afghanistan and Uzbekistan, and I'm the sneaky country named Chad trying to fit in here. So clearly I don't have your broad experience or whatever, but I am going to try to do my best. And I think the reason that I am here is because, and I was asked to be on that first panel, as I wrote a trilogy of books called Alien Shades of Grays, and the last two specifically dealt with that issue of, who are they and why are they here? So book 2 was called Victoria's Secret Truth, and it was a 2-year case study I did of a family that had contact with entities they didn't quite understand. And in the end, looking at all the clinical evidence, which included 4 hypnotic regressions with 3 of the top regressionists in the world, which included 2 by Dr. Leo Sprinkle, 1 by Barbara Lamb, and 1 by Yvonne Smith. It concluded that this individual was telling the truth and that she had been part of a hybridization program. So that was kind of my deep dive into what was going on and what these people were doing. My latest book is Swamp Gas My Ass. And basically, and I'm glad you chuckled, because I had to fight my wife tooth and nail to get that title past her. Basically what it is, it's a story of two pilots who actually intercepted the famous 1966 Michigan UFO, the one, of course, which Dr. Hynek tried to explain as swamp gas. So after several years of chasing down leads and a lot of legwork, I uncovered the lead pilot for that day. His name was Colonel Gary K. Carroll. And if you ever read the book, you'll discover that Colonel Carroll had in his career, some very responsible positions. In fact, at one time, he was head of Air Forces Iceland, which would be our first line of defense should the Soviet Union decide to bring their nuclear bombers up over the pole and down to Canada to try to get us. He was also in charge of the air defense for the entire eastern part of the United States on one of his assignments. He had over 5,000 hours in our best fighter interceptors. And in March of 1966, he was scrambled. He was on 5-minute alert, and he and his wingman, Colonel Bob Nicholson, intercepted one of those swamp gas UFOs, had them on radar, and had them in visual for 45 minutes. I found Colonel Carroll, who unfortunately just passed in November of last year, but I had the opportunity for a full 12-month period to interview him and record those interviews over 30 hours. And there were many times when we just got together to go over the manuscripts and that sort of thing. And unfortunately, a few of those sessions are not recorded. But I have his official military records, his DD-214s, which are published in the book with his permission. I have the DD-214s of his wingman that day, Bob Nicholson, whose family provided those to me. Those are published in the book. I have the memoirs of his wingman, Bob Nicholson, and there are a great deal of those were excerpted into the book and published. I also used previously classified top secret Umbra NSA documents to verify some of their story. And that, of course, is also included in the book. So if we go back to what was happening in Michigan in 1966, the entire area of southeastern Michigan where these events took place were ringed with Nike Hercules missiles, 6 sites of which had nuclear warheads. So the entire city of Detroit was surrounded with nukes. Not only that, but there were 2 squadrons of F-106s at Selfridge Air Force Base in southeastern Michigan, which is the location where these 2 pilots scrambled on that afternoon. Those F-106s were nuclear capable. They had about 40 of these on the base. So doing a little bit of math, maybe half of them could have been armed. And the reason they were is the strategy was, if the Soviet nuclear bombers made it up over the pole and were coming down through Canada, those fighter interceptors were going to be scrambled northbound into Canada. And the strategy was to shoot that F-106 in the right direction, launch that Genie nuclear missile, cut off at Mach 2, and hopefully detonate that missile and blow up all those Soviet bombers as they made their way down through Canada. So, you know, the why of, you mentioned nuclear before, Michigan was loaded with nukes in 1966. And that would have been, if nukes were still of interest to our visitors then, that would have been a great place to understand what we were doing with them militarily. So that's kind of my intro into this. And, you know, now you guys know a little bit more about my background. And one more thing is I worked for nearly 4 decades as a senior scientist at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So that may be of interest to you.
I just want to jump in before anyone else. So Ray, I love that. I'm buying your book. And what's fascinating about what you just said is how you took a very iconic moment in UFO history, that March 1966 the swamp gas moment, of course, and you brought in a critically important national security element to that whole thing. I did not know about any of that, so I'm grateful, and it reinforces how the UFO phenomenon for decades and generations has had supreme national security implications, and that's serious. That's serious stuff. And then interpreting what was going on behind the scenes is the real problem, the real difficulty. And who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? I don't know, but clearly there was trouble going on in Paradise, and we did not know about it. I'm grateful personally that you wrote this book. When we're done here today, I'm ordering it.
Well, thank you.
So, yeah,
I'd be happy to send you an autographed copy.
I'll give you the address.
Free of charge. We'll work that out in the background.
All right.
Through our host.
Sounds good. All right,
great.
Go ahead, Danny. You're going to jump in there. Go ahead.
Well, no, I think that this is demonstrative of all of the extraordinarily interesting dimensions of this whole issue. That they range all the way from the national security state implications of this, both with regard to the present and even past decades of our national security state functioning to perceive these visitors, through the prism of a national security lens, but all the way up to trying to deal with this in sort of a trans-historical perspective of what the importance of this particular period is, assuming that we can survive and not destroy ourselves with thermonuclear weapons, because I agree with you, Richard, that I don't have any great sense that the extraterrestrial visitors are going to intervene and say, oh, gee, let's make sure this particular species on this planet doesn't destroy itself. I think that they're more concerned about us coming out into space, bringing this type of mindset, obviously. And when you see a thing happen like that, one of the more powerful nations on the entire planet chooses a person like Donald Trump, to be president, and he by a stroke of a pen orders the establishment of a space force and talking about lifting missiles up and putting them out into outer space. He's the worst nightmare that our species could have.
Hey, Danny, might they not care about the planet though? Maybe they want the planet, or they don't want that.
There's lots of speculations about that, of course. But you have to understand that now with the James Webb telescope up now, where we're searching out to the very reaches of the universe itself, the total sum mass of energy of our whole universe, at least ostensibly, and that they're being able to actually see potentially the surfaces of some of these exoplanets. The reality is that our species is right on the very brink now of not only discovering the existence in an official capacity of the extraterrestrial civilization, but the mindset that we're reflecting here on our planet, with which we're going to reach out and encounter them, is dire indeed. That as you've pointed out, Richard, we're moving into a stage of kind of a centralized, globalized national security state. That while on the one hand there may be some conceivable advantages to that, so that the extraterrestrial civilization can talk to us with one voice to us, but the reality of this is that the people that are in charge of this global national security state are a 1/10 of 1/100% of our total population, who are greedy, avaricious, self-serving, and closed-minded, and so that that my sense of it is that they're going to discover that not only that there are more than 100 billion stars in our galaxy and more than 200 billion stars in our galaxy, they're probably going to discover there's more like 500 billion stars in our galaxy, most of them having planetary systems. So, our hubris of our human family is in danger of extending out to hubris on behalf of our own planet. of how wonderful and terrific our whole planet is, and like it's sort of the envy of all these different stellar systems around the universe. It's probably not that true. I think I agree with Richard that they're more concerned about us coming out into their domain and bringing with us this kind of belligerent, supercilious, domineering mindset. And so that they'd like to confine us to our planet, hoping that over time, conceivably, if we don't destroy ourselves, that we'll evolve into a higher state of consciousness and might be much more welcome, coming out into their domain. I think these are all subjects that we need to be discussing among ourselves, because that more than just the Catholic Church has called us to have this discussion about the profound philosophical and theological implications of contact with an extraterrestrial civilization. As you, Richard,
I want to add.
We have political, economic, sociological, psychological, all kinds of dimensions of things we need to address ourselves. Go ahead, Richard.
This is really leading into transhumanism, which I'm very uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
But it might be inevitable. By the way, I don't want to make this about Trump per se, but I personally do not think Trump was the problem. I think the much greater problem is the Davos crowds, the World Economic Forum today, of which they hated Trump. And they hated Trump for very specific reasons. Not to make Trump the savior, but these folks they are interested in creating a centralized, as I see it, global anthill. And Trump really wasn't along with that specific agenda. And so they had to take him down. That's my take. Yeah. But the real issue is, if we're going to be moving into a galactic community of some sort, I've speculated. I don't really even know if that galactic community is organic. It might be AI dominated by a super sentient algorithm. It might be what we would call spiritual, if we really understand what that even means. But it wouldn't be organic, like biological life forms. And the reason I think that is, if they've been monitoring us for a long period of time, which it looks like to me, it might indicate that they have an incredibly stable hierarchy. And if they have a very, very stable hierarchy, like we don't have a stable hierarchy, really. If you look at national governments throughout human history, like, can they plan more than 10 years ahead? Egyptian pharaohs had a nice run at it. Hitler thought he could have a 1,000-year right. That didn't work out very long. Like, we don't have the ability, generally speaking, to plan out for centuries and centuries, but they seem to be able to. And if that's true, then it implies to me that they're stable to the point of almost being static. If that's the case, we're at a point in our development where we're definitely not static. We're not stable. We're highly creative. We're highly innovative. That's what happens when you have freedom. Freedom creates instability. Freedom creates all kinds of unknown outcomes. And so I suspect that the transformation we're going through is one to create a transhuman society that we living here probably would not like. But that future generations, they'll just grow into it and they'll be, oh yeah, we've always been the Borg. This is how it's supposed to be. And that might be the only way. I mean, I hate this thought, but it might be the only way that we actually have a genuine connection with these other beings. Because, when you're in a highly, highly sophisticated infrastructure, the thing that you can't have is unknown instability and that messy thing called freedom. That can cause problems. So I think what we can see in our world right now is that freedom really has to be excised from their point of view, because we've got this incredibly intricate, legalistic, bureaucratic framework where there are no more unknowns allowed anymore. You see this. The surveillance is comprehensive. The laws are becoming comprehensive. No more wiggle room for freedom. And if that's a natural progression of society, then I might suspect that this is what we're going to be moving into. And when you look at people's interactions with the gray aliens, for example, and you study that, one thing you don't get with gray aliens is like they're hanging around with a cup of coffee, just bitching about their day. Like they're just like these robots, they're androids, they're these created beings that now maybe we're not allowed to see them in their off duty, but I don't know. I think we've had enough interactions that people have indicated where these beings, this is just how they are. They are created. They're probably not even natural organisms. They're probably artificially created biological organisms that are cybernetic in some way. And what if that's the natural, logical future? If we can see that happening, if that's the case, like, is that a good thing? Back in the 50s and 60s, people were like, "Yeah, these aliens are going to lead us into something better." But to me, I mean, I'm almost afraid of that vision. Like, to me, it almost seems anti-human. I like being a biological, limited, flawed human being that's going to die one day, that's going to die with mystery that I'll never know. That's just me, because that's the human condition, and that's how I kind of was raised to believe in that. But the idea that you have in ufology going back generations of joining a galactic community, it's very much in line with the transhumanist people like Ray Kurzweil and all the other transhumanists that are here today. It seems to me it's like being human as we are right now, this isn't good enough. Maybe it isn't good enough. Maybe we are too violent. Maybe the society that we're living in, this totally unnatural human civilization of almost 8 billion people, which never should have happened. This was never how we were meant to be, in my view. I think this whole thing's a mistake. We were hunters and gatherers living in communities of 10, 15 people for hundreds of thousands of years. Now suddenly we're in these huge cities where we have these sociopathic tendencies because we don't know our neighbors. Like, we're in this very weird society. So maybe we have to change our nature and become ants or become bees in a beehive and not become human beings. Because human beings, as we have been, like, we are aggressive. We had to be aggressive. We had to have sharpened sticks to take down big animals, like, for a long time. And now we're in a situation where, that doesn't work for us. But the question is, how do you change human nature so rapidly without mass psychosis and mass mental illness? I don't think it's possible. I think we're moving into an era of massive mental illness. And, like, this is how we're going to have disclosure as a society of a completely fucked up human civilization where people are just, I mean, sorry, but, like, this is what I think. Like, look all around you. We're not getting better. We're getting worse. We're not going to higher consciousness. We're going to lower consciousness. You have a small group of people who are, yes, delving into truly elite, and elite in a good way, like higher level consciousness. And you've got everyone else jacking into the matrix, essentially. I don't see that as a positive development. So what I see is they're going to be led along like a ring through the nose of a big beast in the field into this new situation that will be guided probably by the good people at Davos and all their cronies who are running every single national government, basically. And they got the whole thing worked out. And then they'll probably do depopulation because there's too many of us. They'll figure that whole thing out. Maybe they're working on that now for all we know. And I'm not expecting this to be a good thing. Maybe it's a necessary thing. But for me, I'm not seeing much of a positive outcome here. I want to be wrong.
Go ahead, Ray. Your turn.
Oh, great. Just wonderful to have this ringside seat with you gentlemen. And, I'll be honest, these are just things that I don't think about now. I'm retired. For me, it's like, where's my next tea time? But the question, when I knew I was shifting panels here, I did some cramming and I went, onto Amazon and I was looking for things and I found Danny back in the unacknowledged stuff and I found Richard in some things to try to get, some more, ideas of their fundamentals. And the thing that just kept popping back at me actually was from Danny's appearance in Unacknowledged and watching that whole Stephen Greer thing and all those people coming through. And there's some pretty solid pieces there, but it made me wonder, are we really ready for this, for this contact. I mean, for 75 years, it was obfuscated and there was a lot of lying going on. And people were just like, yeah, I got other things to do. I really don't want to hear about it. And now with everything going on in the world with, a war's starting to crank up and we've got this COVID thing that we've totally lost control of. Is this really a good time before anyone has done a risk assessment, for example, of, do we really want to go out there with those laser beams like Dr. Greer and those groups are doing and going, come on, boys, come on in, this is really a good place, follow the beam. And I'm really not so sure about that. And I'd really like to posit that to you gentlemen. Do you think this is a really good time where we need to be actively promoting another civilization to come drop in on us?
Talk to that, Danny.
Okay.
Hawking warned against it.
I know they sure have. My sense is this: that again, as you guys probably know, I mean, my initial kind of professional involvement in this whole area, other than my fascination with it, as I'm sure all of us here have had, from the time we were little, interested in stars and potential other civilizations, etc. My professional relationship with this whole issue began when I was at Jesuit headquarters. I say Jesuit headquarters. I was the co-director, basically, of their public policy for the largest single order in all the major denomination in Western civilization. So I came at it through this issue of theological, philosophical, kind of metaphysical interest in what all this implies for our people, for our planet. And I keep seeing this as a perspectile issue, is that if we can have the perspective, not so much right now of talking to them, contacting them, going out to see them, but coming to a full realization that this other dimension of reality exists. And it might help us get over this kind of extraordinary hubris of, on the one hand, as I've said many times, getting out a stick and drawing a line in the dirt and saying, if you climb over this line, I'm going to kill you because you're in my territory. This kind of parochial narrow-mindedness that we have here as a human species. But I think most everybody here realizes that I spend actually my day job is in civil liberties, in individual liberties, in human rights. I mean, I've got this Davos crowd in the Great Reset in this whole this World Economic Forum right straight in my crosshairs right now. I mean, I know exactly who these bad guys are. We're getting set to do a 24 episode podcast about these people and what the history is of this group and who they are and the way they've manipulated things and the kind of evil things that they have done. And that I continue to hold out hope on behalf of our human family as a whole because of the concepts of democracy, individual rights, et cetera. I'm not a big fan of the nation state. I've never been enamored of the Treaty of Westphalia, generated by the royal families, dividing our planet up into these various spheres of influence and all of that. I view that as very primitive. So the question of what kind of culture we can evolve here on our planet that endorses individual liberties, maximizes our personal freedom, it enables us to restrain the kind of advantage taking that is going on the part of this 1/10 of 1% of the people, who leverage their access to the money system that they created for the most part to try to hold us all down. What I find is this is an absolutely extraordinary conversation that we need to have in the context of this larger extraterrestrial civilization. Not so much soliciting them to come in and save us, not encouraging us to go out and hurry up and contact them. People know that I don't agree on all fours with Dr. Stephen Greer. I think most everybody knows that right now, even though I've been general counsel for the Disclosure Project. I think that the disclosure of the existence of the extraterrestrial civilization is extremely important to us. I don't think that it should motivate us to want to go out and necessarily engage with them right now before we have this conversation ourselves. That's what's really what I'm in favor of, is stimulating this conversation, the kind of conversation we're having here today, and to draw more and more people into this. That Richard, you and I have had the beginnings of this conversation.
We sure did.
And we've been carrying on this conversation now for over a good decade or more. And I think we need to do that, because these questions our human family has to address. And I think that the implications are not only for our relationship with an extraterrestrial civilization down the road, but trying to stave off this danger that you're talking about, this kind of globalization of a kind of Borg-like transhuman energy. The very people that we're talking about, I mean, people may not realize this. I mean, these people we're talking about that are at the World Economic Forum, I mean, these people are transhumanists. These people are into
totally 100%.
These people are eugenicists. I mean, these people have spent billions of dollars on eugenics, trying to figure out how to get rid of all the underlings. I mean, people need to understand who these people are. We've got a serious problem. We have kind of an alien element right here on our planet and within our own human family. This element is extraordinary, and we've got to figure out how, if we can, through democratic processes, if not through whatever means is necessary, to disempower these people. I would strongly recommend. There's a book out right now. It's called the Ministry of the Future. Is the book. I would recommend it to you. It's the Ministry of the Future, and it's all about our people trying to come to grips with the fact that 1/10 of 100% of our human family are killing our planet right now, and are continuing to do so. And the neoliberals are all walking around wringing their hands and pacing back and forth, figuring out how can we, without any kind of violence, without any kind of over confrontation of these rich people, how can we get them to agree with us that they ought to share more of the resources of the world? They ought to give us more liberty. I mean, this is a very interesting book.
Are you saying the neoliberals are trying to get the rich to share liberty?
Well, the liberals are. Liberals are the old liberals are still.
Yeah, the old liberals. They don't exist anymore, Danny. They died.
Well, I know that the Clintons and Al Gore and Sam Nunn and all those guys in the Democratic Leadership Conference did a great job of kind of attenuating the traditional liberal class. So the question is, in the progressive community, is there an adequate experiential appreciation of what could be genuinely acknowledged as a spiritual dimension, a kind of paranormal faculty that our human species has latent within us? Can we stimulate this adequately to exercise it and have it play a major role in the progressive worldview, so that we can make progress in the economic and political realm while recognizing the natural world? So I think this issue has to be undertaken within the progressive community. And as everyone knows, I believe that the reality of the different worldviews that our human family has, that I've talked about many times before, the spectrum of human worldviews has to be understood. And we have to have meaningful and real dialogue and conversation among the adherents to the worldviews to try to get at the answers to some of these fundamental questions. And I think that the reality of the existence of an extraterrestrial civilization is very important to stimulating us to have this conversation, because most of our people are not otherwise disposed to engaging in a serious conversation. They're spending their time consuming and getting and spending and laying waste their powers. So we've got to figure out a way to stimulate our people into having this fundamental, meaningful conversation, like we're having here today.
I have to jump in. Okay, first of all, you mentioned the Treaty of Westphalia, so I got very excited just because anyone in the UFO field who mentions that, I'm like, oh my God, I love this. And then you just quoted Wordsworth, one of my faves. So thank you. Yes. I always love being on things with you, Danny. That's just awesome. Like, okay, I hope someone else caught the Wordsworth reference there. I'm with you. A lot of the things you said, I'm totally on board with. I don't really consider myself a progressive anymore. They somehow, I don't know what happened. somewhere along
Yes.
the way, but that's okay. One thing that I would say is that I would like to just address before I don't know how much time we have left, is the whole thesis that is possibly one of the most divisive theses in ufology, and it's not conservatism, liberalism, it's Dr. David Jacobs and the whole idea of alien infiltration and planetary takeover.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I know of any single bit of research that is more divisive among the UFO research community than this idea that there are hostile aliens, or as opposed to the idea that they're not hostile, or as opposed to the idea that we have no idea what they are, and therefore why are we going into this fear-based ideology about these aliens taking over? To me, that is something that that I just want to address here. So, because I think it's relevant when we're dealing with the future of humanity and a post-disclosure world. I personally do credit most of what I read. I've read all of David Jacobs' books very carefully, and I think he has done, and I'm going to say this strongly, an outstanding job at doing genuine counterintelligence as best one can of these alien beings. We can't know everything that they're doing. It's true. We can't fully get inside their head, but we are smart enough that we can observe patterns. They are taking us. They are interested in our reproduction. There's no question about this. They are covert to the extreme. They have the ability, as Tracy mentioned in the last segment, of total cognitive manipulation. When they've got us, not only can they control our emotions, which we've seen countless times, they can control our memory, they can manage our memory, they can control us neurologically. If they don't want you to move a muscle, you're not going to move a muscle. So they've got us, and we can't deal with them. So they are taking us. Yes, they are interested in our reproduction. They are creating hybrids. Yes, they can control us. Yes, they can manage us in seemingly any way they want. None of that looks good to me. And then you go deeper into the research. None of this looks good. Stephen Greer has, in my opinion, an absolutely, not just an unhealthy attitude, I think a positively dangerous attitude about this whole phenomenon. But that doesn't mean that I want to go into complete fear-based mode, like, oh, we have to frighten the public up and run to the hands of the national security state. I've never said that. But right. I also want to I want to have my eyes open to what I feel like I'm in the middle of the shootout at the OK Corral. You want to know the truth? Like, there's no good guys here. And on the world stage, this is like The Godfather with the 5 families. There are no good families. Not the United States, not Russia, not China, not Europe. None of them are good. They're all oligarchies in one way or another. And these alien beings, these grays in particular, I don't know that they're good either. So I just feel like how to deal with them, and have they engaged in any kind of infiltration into our civilization? This is the worst question to ask, because it goes right into like invasion of the body snatchers scenario, and no one likes that. No one likes to go back to the Salem witch trial and like, you're an alien. But what if there is some level of infiltration and we're just blind to it? You get story after story. You can listen to Linda Moulton Howe's research, Whitley's research, David Jacobs' research, Barbara Lamb, who's like the most beautiful grandmother I wish I could have had. I had a beautiful grandmother. Barbara would have been a great substitute. Barbara, but even in her very wonderful interpretation, they're infiltrating our society. She just interprets it as more of a positive than I do. But however you look at it, they're infiltrating. And so what does that mean? Do they have influence? And then ask yourself this. We've just gone through 2+ years of COVID madness, insanity. I don't know how else to put it. We've destroyed our global economy in many ways, destroyed half the small businesses that exist in the United States, maybe Europe too. Like, this has been a bad thing. And I don't believe at all in the positive, beneficent motivations of any of our global leaders. I think they've been gleefully using this as their pretext to create this dystopia that they put us all in. But ask yourself this. Is it possible? I don't have an answer to this. Is it possible, though, that the whole COVID nightmare has been orchestrated by an alien intelligence? Maybe they want to move us into this next phase of our existence. I don't know. But is it impossible? I'm going to say not impossible. How do we test this hypothesis? That's a more difficult question. And I feel bad even raising hypotheses that I don't know how to test at the moment. But I just see a situation in which I don't see good guys out there. Certainly not the United States as a nation, whether it's Trump or Biden. My God, I mean, no way, not good guys. And I don't see good guys anywhere. And if there is an alien presence that is wanting to look out for us, I could believe that. In fact, I think I do believe that, but how active are they really? We've got some very good accounts of abductees who do indicate a beneficent, positive alien presence. So thank goodness for that. And I hope that's true. But they also don't seem to be bailing our sorry butts out of the fire. We're in a mess. So, all right, I wrote another note down here. Oh, yes, progressivism, yes, insofar as it promotes fundamental human rights and human dignity, particularly vis-a-vis an overwhelming power of the state. That's critically important. And if progressivism still means that, then yes, count me in as a progressive in that regard. So that's an area where genuine progressives and people have been who've become afraid of many aspects of progressivism today, which I include myself as one. This is the critical common ground. Because I'm really not I'm an old school liberal, really is what I think I am, who believes in human rights, basically. And so that's how to maintain that in the face of dealing with basically the modern day version of the Mafia 5 families running the world. The only way we can do it, honestly, is by, I feel that the UFO research community has got to promote as much truth to the outside world as we can. And we can't sugarcoat things anymore. No more of this like, oh, well, maybe there's something out there. I understand why Lou has to say that.
Right.
Lou is bound by his security agreements. He can't, but others of us can. And the problem, though, is breaking through the monolithic media that is totally controlled. We have such an unbelievably controlled media, from Fox to the New York Times to CNN, all of them. And so there's YouTube, and that's being constricted. So thank God, I'm happy that Elon Musk bought Twitter. Maybe Twitter can open up a pipeline so that we can have a more open and honest and adult conversation about this subject, which we desperately need to have. We have got to wake as many people up as possible that there are abductions, there's a cover-up, there's an illegal criminal nature to this cover-up. Like, if we're not talking about that, then this whole thing can be dragged out for generations before we get any kind of actual so-called disclosure that will be pre-chewed by the national security apparatus and given to us through the mama bird known as the media, like we're little baby birds just taking the food from them that they've already chewed.
It has been for these last few generations, right?
That's it. So, I mean, unless we're going to have a meaning, like we need that if we're going to have a meaningful disclosure. Otherwise, it will be a completely controlled disclosure in which it's not disclosure. It's just, a message that's been spun by them for their purposes, which I think that's what's happening. That's what I think.
Okay, Ray, before we run out of time, jump in here. Come on now. We don't want to.
Richard, a little twist on what you said. One of my theories is if you look at the timing, that perhaps this COVID thing was actually a test to see how we would respond to an alien virus that got loose. So, maybe the dark state knew that disclosure contact is closer than we think, and they put this out there to say, COVID out there to say, oh well, how are we going to react to this alien thing? Well, let's use COVID as a test case and see how do the countries respond. What will the people do if they're told they have to wear masks? So now we got a little bit more data on how to handle the aliens are here and they're bringing some bad stuff with them. The other thing I'd like to add is, the impact of these visitors, in my personal experience, is really all over the board. I've got personal friends. I'm only going to use my personal friends in this because I'm close to these people and I trust what they say. One has a couple of PhDs. One of them is in biochemistry, and she's very well known in her field. She tells me only after she reads my second book, and I've known her for decades, only reveals to me after she reads Victoria's Secret Truth that she was visited when she was a small child, and she credits her incredible intellect to these visitors. So that's case number one. Case number two is Victoria, who says, well, I think I had a pre-birth agreement with these people or whatever they are, these entities, and I agreed to let them make me part of the hybridization program. And she's okay with that. She knows she was floated out through the wall. She knows she was on a spaceship. She knows that they were doing all these gynecological procedures on her, but she's okay with it. And then I've got another person who's also happens to be in the medical field, a first responder, nurse, very well accomplished in her field, who's had night terrors from the time she's a child until the present day because of her contact with these entities. And one day at dinner, she tells me recently, after reading my second book, she said, my children came to dinner one day and said, are we going to tell mom? And her husband said, tell mom what? And the husband had no idea that the wife has been through this her whole lifetime. And the woman didn't know that her children were about to tell the story. And they said, well, we want to let mom know that she and both of us, the two brothers, were on a spaceship together last night. Whereupon the husband nearly had a heart attack. Like, imagine getting your news at the dinner table. So
he's feeling like my wife and kids have both been alien abductees forever. He had no idea.
So you have this wide spectrum of, oh, well, it's really good because, Dr. Laurie's got this PhD and she's doing good for people and she credits her intellect to that. Then you got somebody who's got the hybridization program kind of in the middle. And then you got this other person who's had night terrors and now has a divorce. So do we really know what's going on with these folks? And do we really, again, I'll ask the question, do we really want to invite them by pointing these great things at the sky and say, come on in, guys, we got a landing spot all picked out for you. So, I'd like to just leave you guys with those thoughts.
Thanks, Ray.
Before we end, I might point out that I don't believe that, that Stephen Greer and the other people that are pointing the laser beams out into outer space are going to necessarily influence what the decision is that's being made by the extraterrestrial people as to where and when they're going to have any contact with us or who they're going to contact. I do believe that there is a collective consciousness among in some type of apparent coordination among the different species of extraterrestrials. There's some kind of communication that seems to be going on among them to at least hold any of them that are overtly hostile to us in some degree of abeyance. But these are things that we have to have intelligent conversations about here among ourselves, and we do have to engage the levels of the human community that specialize in sociology, psychology, politics, economics, etc. And we really need to have this conversation. And I'm hoping that what's happened here in the last, since 2017 at least, is instigating more of that type of a conversation. We here, of those of us that have been involved in this for some decades now, need to turn our attention to try to facilitate that, really invite that conversation, to really probe into this, explore what the topography is of the subject, what the various theories are about all this, et cetera. I've been approached by, a major production company that want to hold trials about this, the thing called X trials, that they want me to be one of the litigators in trying to litigate these issues by bringing the real experts in, having the conversations, in panel genuine juries of our peers, putting cameras in the jury room so that when the dialogue is going on among real people about what they think about what the experts are saying, et cetera, it's just a device they're talking about focusing on this subject and trying to deal with that. But there are other avenues and means that we have to talk about. Richard, you and I have, more conversations to have here about this, how we can facilitate, bring whatever the total number of years are that you and I have been in this field together. I think that we're both, I hope at least, viewed as two of the more level-headed guys that are involved in this. I don't think that we've alienated people in any of the camps. I know that Stephen Greer is upset that I'm, representing Lou Elizondo, and I know that Lou is upset about some of the things that Stephen does, et cetera, as many people are. But I think that what we have to do is try to bring our history and our experience together to help stimulate and instigate this dialogue. I really do. I think the time is ripe for us to do this. And I think that conversations like this, I'm just plugging in my computer so it doesn't run out of gas, that we should have the conversations about how to help do this. And Ray,
totally on board.
Yeah.
Agreed. And listen, you guys are the pillars of this community, and we are so indebted to you. And thank you so much today for taking the time and sharing your time with us, your valuable time with us, your insights with us. We all really, really, really appreciate it. So thank you guys so much. And thanks to Steve, Alan, and Tracy as well. I'm going to let you guys go now. You can go put your avatars on and get on the platform and say hello to people if you'd like. That's going to be over at the New Paradigm Pavilion right across the street from here. So thank you again, guys. Appreciate it.
Terrific. Thank you,
Great
guys.
pleasure. Thank you,
guys. Thank you so much for letting me join you.
Well, thank you, Ray. We appreciate
awesome.
you.
Everything was great.
Thank you so much.
This was a great pleasure today to have all 6 of these speakers, obviously. So stay in touch with us. Go to our email list, join our email list, check in with theobservationdeck.com, see what's happening, see our links for our videos for past events. You're welcome to all that material. We have my podcast is on YouTube as the Observation Deck as well. So check all that out. Stay in touch with us, and we'll keep you up to date as to where we're going to move to and where we'll be doing other events. Meanwhile, I want to just take a quick minute here and just thank some of the people real quick who made this place possible. No one ever made a dime here, and it's absolutely amazing what we were able to pull off, and the connections that we've made and some of the insights that were shared on this platform have been absolutely incredible. And it meant a lot to a lot of us. And I just want to really quick thanks a lot of these people real fast. Of course, the mayor of our avatar world, Jordan Pease, who's really behind everything we've done on here. Kate Chassé. Robert Lamke has been on this platform more than I think the developers who created the platform. Robert has just volunteered to help us and done a great job, and I appreciate it. Nikki has helped us out, Nikki Clifton. Mackenzie Marcone, Matthew Mello, really appreciate you guys helping us this whole year. It's been wonderful. I also want to thank real quick our supporters and promotional partners, which are Sophia V. Thank you. Ryan Stacy, Michael Ney, Jimmy Church, Alan Steinfeld, everyone else who's helped us, who's been a part of this in any way, shape, or form, or touched this community. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we can all do some more stuff in the future. So thanks everyone who also participated in coming to some of these events. Hopefully you enjoyed events like today. We were able to put 6 amazing speakers on for free today, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. And hopefully you'll keep following us and find out what we've got coming up in the future.